Survival shotgun loadouts. That's what we're going to talk about today on Gunfighter Life. The podcast where we talk about guns, gunfighting, tactics, ballistics, survival, the right way, with Almighty God at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. On that, first and foremost, I'm a servant of God and a follower of Jesus Christ. Everything else comes after that. But military, law enforcement, private security contracting, competition shooting, hunting, background, bullet points in the show notes. Okay, with that, I'm going to jump quickly into today's topic. I get tired of doing all the caveats. Let's jump into the survival shotgun loadout. And I'm going to dive in ammo first into the ammunition loadout, because that's what makes a shotgun so versatile, right? There are guns with more magazine capacity than the shotgun. There are guns with more portability. There's guns with longer range, but there is nothing that beats the versatility of the shotgun. And that versatility lies in the fact that you can swap out ammo, anything from a slug to birdshot and many things in between. That is what we're going to talk about today. Let's go, for some kind of order, let's go from largest to smallest. And let's go assuming 100 rounds. 100 rounds is 4 boxes of 25 rounds. That's probably as much as you're going to carry in a man-portable system with all the other stuff. Because even if you're going back to base every day or whatever you're doing, or especially if you're bugging out, that's probably the limit, because you got to carry a bunch of other stuff. Water or water purification, a sleep system, all kinds of stuff. Communications, you're going to have to carry all kinds of other stuff. If you're in this kind of scenario, likely body armor, right? That stuff gets heavy. So 100 rounds of shotgun, which is 4 boxes, 4 25-round boxes. Not that that's necessarily how you're going to break it down, but that is quite a hefty load. With that in mind, we'll start with the biggest for slugs. I'm going to say if we're limiting ourselves to 100 rounds, and it could be, 115, because you might carry 4 boxes and what's on the gun. But let's just make it a nice round number of 100. 15 slugs. If your shotgun is just a plain vanilla 870 that holds 5 rounds, that's 3 complete loadouts of slugs. That's quite a bit. 15 slugs. That's going to be my loadout. Now, what slugs? Whatever slug your shotgun shoots, point of aim, point of impact. You wouldn't, I hope, get, a 308 bolt gun and just buy a box of ammo at Walmart and assume that it shoots where you're aiming, right? You would sight in your gun, you would find ammo that your gun liked, and you would make sure it shot point of aim, point of impact. I'd hate to bust your fantasy bubble, but you have to do the same thing with a shotgun. You have to sight it in with slugs. You have to find slugs that shoot point of aim, point of impact. So whatever that is for you. But in America, it's probably going to be some version of rifled Foster slug. You could argue whether you want a 7/8 ounce Remington Slugger, you want a 3-inch Magnum, you want a Bernanke slug, which a Bernanke is a whole different design slug than a Foster slug. You could make the case, and it would be a good one, that the Bernanke is a better design slug, kind of works off the badminton principle. But it's a good design, solid. You might go for deep penetrator slugs. You may go for low recoil slugs. Why is that? Well, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you make Chuck Norris look like a soy boy. You can't cheat physics. No matter how good you are at controlling recoil, if you reduce it, you can get follow-up shots on target faster if you're actually aiming, not just blasting, a sand berm as fast as you can because you have a cool binary firing trigger. But if you're actually trying to hit what you're aiming at, the less recoil you have, the faster you can get rounds on target. And a low recoil slug is still, an ounce slug at 1,300 feet a second? That's still more than you're probably going to need for whitetail deer and defense against people. I'm not saying you should go the low recoil route, but there's a lot of argument for that one too. I'm going to try and move on from this. I could talk for over an hour on just slugs. As much as people like to nerd out on, the 6.5 Creedmoor versus the 308, I'm here to tell you for practical purposes, there's more variation, I think, in just 12 gauge slug design. There's more difference and variation in that than there is difference between 6.5 Creedmoor and 308 for practical purposes for the average person. But there's a lot. But choose a slug wisely that shoots point of aim, point of impact with your shotgun when fired by you that you can control. And I'm going to say your average vanilla Foster slug, 1 ounce, which is 437-ish grains at right around 1,600 feet a second. That's a good place to start. Now let's talk about buckshot. Your general go-to is going to be double-aught buck. It's what the military uses. It's what the police usually use. It's what I've used quite a bit. Double-aught buck. I'm here to tell you it's got its place. But it's not the only buckshot. I would probably go with 10 rounds of double-aught buck. Again, if you're using your plain vanilla 870, which I'm not saying you should, especially not if it's a new one. They're not made as well as they used to be. But that's 2 complete loadouts. That's a full tube and a side saddle full of double-aught buck. Now, your average plain Jane is going to be 9 pellets of double-aught buck. But you can get fancy. You can get plated buckshot. You can get the flight control wad or the Versatite wad, depending on what shotgun configuration you have. You could go with 8 pellet if you want, because it's probably, like the low recoil slug, going to be more than enough. A little bit less recoil. Sometimes they pattern better. But let's go with 10 rounds of double-aught buck. Why? Because I want 15 rounds of number 4 buck. I like number 4 better. Call me a contrarian, but I've got quite a bit of experience with buckshot, and I prefer number 4 buck. Why? Survival math. So if my numbers are correct in my head, I'm not looking this up, but double-aught buck is 33 caliber. You get 9 pellets in a standard load and 12 pellets in a magnum load. Number 4 buck, I do believe, is 24 caliber, and you get 27 in a regular shell and 41 in a 3-inch magnum. 9 versus 27, or 12 versus 41. And at buckshot ranges, the odds of hitting something very vital with one of those pellets increases exponentially with those numbers. And a 27 pellet going at 1,600 feet a second or 1,300 feet a second, whatever, is going to probably be more than enough to take out whatever that crucial point is, whether it be spinal cord or lungs or liver. I've done quite a bit of hunting with both, and I like number 4 buck. It's also great for defense. You get more pellets, and each one of those is still 24 caliber, going at a decent clip, going at a decent speed. So I prefer that. So if I was breaking down the buckshot, I would go 10 for the double-aught and then 15 for the number 4 buck. But you do you. You may decide you want all, double-aught buck. You may decide you want to get big, go big or go home and get triple-aught buck, which is 36 caliber. You generally lose quite a bit in pellet count, but hey, you do you. And the number 1 buck is not often seen, but it's a very good compromise between double-aught and number 4. Don't ask me what caliber number 1 buck is, because I don't generally use it. But the buckshot, and again, you do you, but I would really look at number 4 if you've only ever had experience with double-aught buck, because it's, what you saw somebody use on TV or something. I like number 4 buck. You should do your own testing, your own evaluation with number 4 buck. Okay, let's move on here. Let's do number 6 shot. Number 6 shot, I would have 20. I would have 20 number 6 shot. Number 6 shot is super versatile. High brass number 6 shot. Before they, made you use steel shot for waterfowl, or before California went uber liberal, a lot of people hunted ducks. I still have old shotgun manuals that talk about number 6 lead shot for duck. It's great for waterfowl. It's also great for your bigger birds. You might decide you want something else, but number 6 would work fine for pheasant. It would work fine for grouse. It's good for other small game. It's a good versatile load for, let's say, larger small game. Number 6 shot is great for that. So number 6 shot, 20 of those. For lighter bird shot, I would say 10 rounds of number 8. Number 8 is good for your much smaller small game, for your doves, for your quail, for your more delicate birds. You know, if you're in a survival situation, things you wouldn't normally shoot, like robins that are pretty common all across the United States, things like that. You might want smaller shot. You get a much better pellet count going down from a 6 to an 8. It may not sound that different, but they are vastly different in size, and especially if you're trying to shoot something off the wing, which you probably want to stay away from in a survival situation, but it may get to the point where you haven't eaten in a while and that one grouse you flush is what you see. And you might be shooting off the wing. If you're shooting lighter birds off the wing, like quail, doves, you might want to drop down to that number 8 shot. So I would want a decent amount of those. Now, one of the other things that makes the shotgun so versatile are the specialty rounds. Depending on if you're a more urban and rural environment, you may adjust these numbers, but I would probably go with something like 2 less lethal rounds, like rubber buckshot. You might think, I'm in a survival situation. Yeah, that doesn't just mean you just kill everybody unless you have no morals, right? You may get to a point where you want to use force and you may want to project force, but you don't want to kill somebody. Maybe you don't want to kill the 12-year-old trying to take your food. Maybe you just want to get them away from you. You do you, but I can see a lot of reason for less lethal in a shotgun. One of the things that makes it so versatile. So let's say 2 rounds of that. I don't want a bunch of it, but I want an option, a less lethal option. And since I already have the shotgun, and rubber buckshot weighs very, very little because the most of the weight in the shotgun shell is the lead. There's no lead in that, so they're very light. They're not going to take up much weight. And then the other 3 rounds to round out that 5, I would want breaching rounds. Breaching rounds because I want to use a universal lock opener if I can help it. Now, I'd also want a different way to open a door. I don't always want to be so, loud and obnoxious about opening a door, but sometimes I want that door open right now, and breaching rounds are good for that. So, what is that? 2 and 3, 5. Let's see how that survival math adds up. I think that is going to be right around 100 rounds. Hopefully I did that math right. But 100 rounds, that's a pretty good loadout. And again, you can adjust those numbers for you depending on what you're doing. If you live in a place with a ton of, small game, upland birds, things like that, and very, very low population density, like North Dakota, you probably want to adjust those numbers for you. I'm just giving you a good all-around loadout. Some other things in the loadout before I get to the shotgun itself. I'm a big fan of the sling bag, and I'm a guy that wears jungle boots, body armor, and a war belt for my primary breadwinning job as a private security contractor. But not everything has to be uber tactical. Not everything has to have Molly on top of Molly. Not everything has to be black multicam, right? Just a regular satchel, like a Soviet-era bread bag or something like that you can carry a bunch of shotgun shells in. I have a nice felt bag that I like because it's quiet when I'm hunting. It'll hold a lot of shotgun shells, but just a simple sling bag. But I gotta be ready to speed reload like I'm doing my 3-gun competition, except you don't. That's a game, and I love 3-gun. But here's the deal. I don't say this to brag, but God's got me through a lot of hairy situations. I've been in a few hairy situations with a shotgun. It's hard for me to imagine, even in a prepper fantasy fiction novel, well, the girls are swooning over you because you have a bug-out bag. Even in that fantasy scenario, it's hard for me to imagine a problem that I can't solve with 5 rounds of double-up buck in a tactical situation and or slugs. That's a lot of firepower. You think, shotgun's low capacity. Well, an AR-15 is a 30-round mag. If we go back to that number 4 buck, we got 41 pellets. Just a regular shotgun, let's go 41 times 5. Well, that's a lot of projectiles on tap if you look at it that way. What situation can you not solve with 5 rounds of buckshot that you're going to solve with a quick speed reload? Again, it's not 3-gun. 3-gun is super fun. I love 3-gun. But let's look at this practically and not like we're trying to be John Wick. So just a satchel is usually pretty good. And I should talk about it when we get to the shotgun, but a side saddle. If you're familiar with reloading quickly off a side saddle, if you do run dry, you can get 1 round into that chamber real quick with a side saddle if you know what you're doing. So just a simple side saddle is a good option for the shotgun. But a satchel doesn't have to be uber tactical. Just a good shoulder satchel that you can take on and off easily, put it in a bag easily. That's it. That's what I found to be a very good option. If you want to be the dude with your body armor, the entire front is loaded up with shotgun shells and molly, that's fine. I'm not going to fault you for it. But I'm telling you, my general go-to is some kind of satchel. They weigh very little. In that satchel, you probably also want to have a bore snake. One of the great things about the shotgun, most shotguns, is they're so low maintenance. They're like the opposite of an AR-15 when it comes to maintenance. You could probably get a good one and never maintain it your entire life, pass it down to your kid, and it would still work. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm saying it probably still would fire, even if you shot it and never cleaned it. Even in the nastiest of environments, they're so robust and rugged. If you get a good one, if you get some cheap Turk nasty clone, it might not work right out of the box. I'm telling you about a good quality shotgun. Even so, why not have a bore snake? They weigh very little. They're so easy to have. Why not have a bore snake? So have a bore snake and a little bottle of CLP or some kind of lube. Super easy. Throw it in the satchel. Forget about it. What is a bore snake? Probably weighs less than one slug, or right around the same weight as a shotgun shell, right? So, if you're worried about weight, get rid of a shotgun shell and put a bore snake in there. Okay, let's talk about the shotgun itself. There's really only two. I've talked about this before. The duality of survival for me goes to, and one of the reasons I like the shotgun is for defense and for feeding yourself. I never said the shotgun is the best in all situations. I'm not ever saying the shotgun is best for you. I'm not saying the shotgun always takes the place of an AR-15 or a battle rifle, like a SCAR-17, a SCAR Heavy, or a SIG Spear, whatever your flavor is, right? There's a time and a place for a proper battlefield implement. If you're on a battlefield, if that's what you're envisioning, if you're envisioning Red Dawn with zombies, you might want something else. But if we look at the shotgun and the duality of survival, both defense and feeding yourself, you go back to the only thing you've seen in 3 days to eat is a grouse that you jumped up right in front of you. You probably don't want the AR-15 or the 308 for that. The whole point of you shooting is so you can eat it. You probably don't want to shoot it with a 308 if it's a small bird and you want to eat it. Or a 5.56 for that matter. You get the idea. The shotgun is super flexible for that. But you may also have to use it for defense. That being said, going back to, there's really only two options in my brain, unless you get into crazy stuff. But the pump action shotgun and the semi-auto shotgun. I'm not going to dive too deeply into this because I've done a whole episode on the difference and the benefits and detriments of a pump action shotgun versus a semi-auto. What I will say is your best value by far is a pump action rather. You can get a decent pump action for a few $100s. There's only a few semi-autos that I would consider reliable enough for this task. There are a lot of semi-autos, and they're fine for sporting use, they're fine for range use. But if I'm talking about one to head into the apocalypse or peanut butter chocolate and hitting the fan or a long grid down scenario, however you want to quantify that, there's only a few. There's really the Benellis and the Berettas, and none of those are cheap. No, sorry, your cheap Turkish clone made by Muslims that want to take your women and cut your head off, and you want to give them money, I'm sorry, but that clone of a Benelli M4 is not a Benelli M4, and it's not going to work like a Benelli M4, at least not for long, in my opinion. So you got your Benellis and you got your Berettas. There may be one or two others, but really, those are expensive guns. They are several times the cost of something like a Mossberg 500, which is a decent gun. So if you're looking for value, I would go with the pump action. And there are other benefits to both platforms. Real quick, you can run a semi-auto one-handed if you have to do something with the other hand. If you're man enough to beef it up there in your shoulder and hold it with one hand, you can fire repeatedly with one hand. You can't do that with a pump. But a pump, if you're talking about really nasty, austere environments, it's probably going to be less affected by that. Although I'd hate to see what you'd have to do to stop a Benelli semi-auto, that being said, because they're inertia-driven. But anyway, there's really only two. Why? Because rate of fire. I'm sorry, but however cool it looks in some apocalyptic movie, a double-barrel shotgun is not great. If you're in some fantasy novel or movie where they write the script and you have just enough time to get 2 more shells in there, that's fine. But if you got a side-by-side shotgun, coach gun, because it looks cool, and you got 4 attackers, that's not going to work out too well for you. Reasonable rate of fire, so pump or semi-auto. If, let's be honest, if you're getting a lever action, you're getting it because you live in Australia, because your government's so bad you can't even have a pump shotgun, or you think it looks cool. And that's fine, but even John Browning, from what I understand, was against making a lever action shotgun. And he's the one that designed it because that's what Winchester wanted. But even he thought it was a bad idea. And it is a bad idea. When a pump is so much simpler and better and more reliable, like, stop. You're just getting it because it looks cool. And if you're doing that, this is probably not the podcast for you. And there are a few older bolt action shotguns, but when pumps are so available and affordable, just go with a pump. Okay, how to set up said shotgun. You're really not giving much up because the feed tubes are normally aluminum. We go back to just a 5-round shotgun. If that's what you have, that's fine. But if you can put a magazine tube extension to make it at least as long as the barrel, you're not making the gun any less wieldy, not making it a lot heavier. So why not hold, 5 rounds more? You might be able to hold 10 rounds or 9 rounds or 7 rounds, depending on the length of the barrel. But let's say you just put a +2. You go to 7 rounds. That's quite a bit as far as percentage goes. And not that you need it, but you're not giving a lot up. It's not like you're, giving up a lot. A lot of things in the firearms world are a trade-off, but you're not really giving up a lot by going to a +2 aluminum tube that screws onto the end of the tube you already have. So why not do that? Now, if you're bird hunting and you're shooting birds off the wing, there's a reason they invented the vent rib shotgun. But I'm here to tell you, I prefer a rifle with sights. I prefer a smoothbore shotgun, not a rifled barrel shotgun, because that is for sabot slugs, which gets rid of all the versatility of a shotgun. But a smoothbore shotgun with rifled sights, I think that's your best bet for survival. I've talked about that before. But if those rounds are the rounds that you have, unless you really have to because you're going to die, and you can still do it. I've shot sporting clays with rifle sights. You can do it on a shotgun. But for wing shooting, the vent rib is better. But for pretty much everything else, for defense, for pretty much anything, I think your best bet is rifled sights or rifle sights on a smoothbore shotgun. You can go ghost ring, you can go open sights. I don't care. 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. But sights, you can actually sight the shotgun. I think that's your best bet. And in 2025, put an optic on it. It's a force multiplier. And I like a lot that Mossberg does, but I'm not a big fan of some of their newer models where they have just like a bead and they have a way to mount an optic that takes away your rear sight, or they have sights and you take off your rear sight to mount the red dot, like a pistol red dot. That's okay if you're on a range or you're doing something like that. But if we're talking about this kind of scenario, I want to co-witness, because kind of my philosophy is I will use the optic, and then when, not if, but when the dot goes out, when the optic break, I'll just run the iron sights. If you have co-witnessed iron sights with a red dot, especially a handgun red dot, doesn't weigh very much. You're not giving up a lot there. You're gaining quite a bit of speed and versatility, and why not? And then when it breaks, you can still use your iron sights. Even if it breaks in the middle of an encounter, you can still use your irons if the dot goes out. And you just get a system that you can quickly unscrew and throw it away. But while you have it, it's a force multiplier. So that would be my setup for that. I would have good rifle-style sights and a co-witness red dot if I can get it. I wouldn't have just a red dot with like a bead. I wouldn't have just a bead. I don't care that they're called the home defense model or whatever. If you're just going to use it inside your bedroom, just a regular bead is fine. But if you're going to step outside that room, they're pretty much garbage, in my opinion. Get something other than a bead. Get something with sights. I pretty much went to the default today on 12 gauge, but pretty much anything I said besides the buckshot sizes, because they're going to be a little bit different on how they stack into a 20 gauge shell, you could apply to 20 gauge and you could carry more ammo. That's one of the big advantages of the 20 gauge. At least for size and weight, you're generally going to get more ammo with the 20 gauge. I say generally, you could get a really light 12 gauge load and a really heavy 20 gauge load, and the 20 gauge might weigh more per shell. But it's still going to be smaller if you're trying to pack it in a pack. So whatever I said for the 20, whatever I said for the 12, rather, apply it to the 20. Again, this is a complex topic, but I'm trying to give you a rundown of a loadout, a shotgun survival loadout in a manageable amount of time. Again, I could talk for an hour on slugs. I could talk for an hour on buckshot. I've done whole episodes on both, so look those up. I'm not going to insult you. Also, if you like this episode, patrons voted on this. So if you want to be part of that, go to Patreon. I try to remember to make the polls open to anybody. You don't have to give money or anything. You can just go vote on the content. If you just are one of the, Gen Pop normie listeners, that just listens to anything that the GunTube glitterati regurgitates, whatever thing the gun industry is pushing this month, then that's fine. Don't contribute. But if you actually want to say in what you listen to, I try and put up quite often a list of topics, and you guys vote on what you want to hear, what you want me to talk about, what you want to learn about. So if you want to be more than just a normie Gen Pop listener, then go to Patreon and just scroll through and look for the polls. Anyway, with that, guys, a 12-gauge barrel is pretty much just like a big tube, right? So for the tactical tip of the day, if you don't have that bore snake, you can just get a dry piece of cloth, put some oil on it, tie a shoelace or a piece of 550 cord around it, drop one end down the barrel and pull it through. Pull it through the same direction that the projectiles go, from the breech to the muzzle. But really, that'll get you through if you need to. You don't need anything nearly as exact as you would for cleaning like a 5.56. Also, let's do the tactical verse of the day. I've got two that really stood out to me today that I wanted to read here. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. And come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you. I will be a father to you, and you shall be my sons and daughters, says the Lord Almighty. Those are both from 2 Corinthians. Thanks for listening, and have a blessed day.